Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about times in the Bible that people have fallen asleep and it has ended badly for them. So these are times that people have physically fallen asleep, but we're going to talk about how that relates to us spiritually. So we're going to be doing a lot of reading, a lot of studying, and just digging deep in the Word and finding out how this relates to us. So we're going to first start in Judges 4. Now, this is when Israel was doing evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, the king of Canaan. So, for 20 years, the captain of the host was Sisera, and he mightily oppressed Israel for 20 years. And Deborah, who is a judge of the time, one of the women judges who rose up, she prophesies that the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. So Israel defeats Sisera's army, and Sisera flees to the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. So we're going to start at chapter 4 in verse 17. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera, and said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. And when he had turned in unto her into the tent, she covered him with a mantle. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk, and gave him drink, and covered him. Again he said unto her, Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be, when any man doth come and inquire of thee, and say, Is there any man here? That thou shalt say, No. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent, and took an hammer in her hand, and went softly unto him, and smote the nail into his temples, and fastened it into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. So Sisera flees on foot to the tent of Jael, and it says that there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. So when Sisera went to her tent, he did that thinking that there was an alliance there and that he was going to be safe there. And Jael, she settles him down to sleep. So he's asking for water. She gives him milk, and she is the one who went out to meet him to begin with and says, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. So she is not an Israelite. So we have to just imagine maybe that she just knew that he was causing, the Israelites to be oppressed. He was mightily oppressing them for 20 years. And maybe she had compassion for the Israelites. Maybe she knew who God really was and wanted to serve the Israelites in some way. I'm not really sure. But she is the one who goes out to meet him and says, Come in. And she, instead of giving him water, she gives him milk. She settles him down. She covers him with a mantle. She tells him that if anybody comes, she'll tell them there's no man there. So in this instance, the bad guy is Sisera. He's the one who dies. He's the one who fell asleep. But we can still learn from him because he was lulled into a false sense of security. He thought he had peace with this person. So if we apply that to us spiritually, we cannot assume that, we have peace with everyone. We have to be on guard all the time against our enemy, the devil. So, I want to be like Jael. She was aware of who the enemy is. We can't kill anyone. She physically killed him, but we need to be aware of who the enemy is, and we don't need to be like Sisera, who was lulled into that false sense of security. He was lulled to sleep. He fell fast asleep. He was weary, and he put his trust in this woman, and she took a nail and a hammer and killed him. She hammered that into his temples. I mean, that is a very gruesome way to die. So the prophecy was fulfilled. Deborah prophesied that the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman, and that did happen. So we just need to be careful about not being lulled into that false sense of security and falling asleep when we should be on guard and aware of our surroundings. Okay, so now we're going to go over to Judges chapter 16, and we're going to talk about Samson. So Samson was a Nazarite from the womb, and he had the Nazarite law. He could not have a razor come upon his head. He was not supposed to eat anything from a vine, have strong drink or wine, and he could not eat anything unclean. So whenever we go to Judges chapter 16, we know that Samson loves a woman named Delilah. And it says in verse 4, "It came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistine came up unto her, and said unto her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver." So, Samson loves Delilah. Delilah clearly does not love Samson. The Philistines come to her and say, "We will pay you if you can figure out where Samson's great strength lies." So immediately she starts asking Samson, "Where does your great strength lie?" She knows Samson loves her. So she's trying to get that information from him. So let's start in verse 6. "And Delilah said to Samson, Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. And Samson said unto her, If they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs with which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs, as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth the fire. So his strength was not known." So the first thing he tells her was not true. That was not where his great strength lieth. The 7 withs, if he was bound with those, that was not true. Now, he should have known right then that when he told her that and she tried that on him, he should have known right then that she was trying to destroy him and take his strength away. Okay, he did not learn his lesson that time. So, it says, "And Delilah said unto Samson, Behold, thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, If they bind me fast with new ropes, that were never occupied, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Delilah therefore took new ropes, and bound him therewith, and said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liers in wait abiding in the chamber, and he brake them from off his arms like a thread." So again, he's telling her, "Well, if you bind me with new rope, then I'll be as other men. My strength will be taken away." And she tries that. So that's 2 times she has tried to take his strength away. That's 2 times that she has had people waiting, in the chamber with them to overtake Samson. He still does not learn his lesson. "And Delilah said unto Samson, Hitherto thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, If thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. She fastened it with the pin, and said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awaked out of his sleep, and went away with the pin of the beam, and with the web." Okay, so he's getting closer to where his great strength lies, the hair on his head. He says, "If you weave the 7 locks of my hair." And we know he fell asleep then too, because it says he awaked out of his sleep. So that's 3 times that he has told her a lie. 3 times she has tried to take his strength away, and he is still sleeping in her chamber. Verse 15 says, "And she said unto him, How canst thou say, I love thee, when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death." If your soul is vexed unto death by somebody who is clearly trying to take your strength away, get away right then. It says his soul was vexed unto death. She nagged and pestered him, and he loved her, and he knew that she was trying to take his strength, and yet he stayed. Verse 17, "That he told her all his heart, and said unto her, There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like other men." So he told her his whole heart, even though he knew she could not be trusted. "And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this once, for he hath showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and brought money in their hand. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep, and said, I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. But the Philistines took him, and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. So 3 times Delilah showed Samson that she was trying to take his strength and destroy him, and he kept sleeping with the enemy. He did not leave. He stayed there. His soul was vexed. He told her his whole heart and his whole truth about his strength. And Delilah clearly did not love Samson, because Samson knew she could not be trusted. Yet he told her his whole heart. And that is what happens sometimes with us. We give someone our whole heart who is clearly not worthy. They don't see who we are, they don't see us how God sees us. And they cannot be trusted with our heart, yet we give that to them anyway. And immediately she tells the Philistines, he's told me his whole heart. And she tells everything that he told her, and she uses it against him. And it says that she made him sleep upon her knees. So he physically fell asleep, but he was already spiritually asleep long before that, because he was shown time and time again. And how this happens a lot with us as well. We are shown, the true nature of people, yet we overlook it because we love them. And we know that they cannot be trusted with our secrets, our dreams, our heart, yet we give it all to them anyway. And those type of people who don't respect us and don't see us how God sees us, they cannot be trusted. And we cannot fall asleep around them. Physically, spiritually, we cannot. And he was given chance after chance. And I feel like we do that a lot. We give people so many chances, knowing that they're trying to destroy us, knowing they're not who God wants us to be around. And he kept sleeping with the enemy. And, he was destroyed because of it. So we need to keep our eyes open. And we definitely need to guard our heart and guard our strength. Okay, so we're going to move on over to Luke chapter 22. And this is when the disciples fall asleep. So first we're going to read 22, starting at verse 31. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. And he said unto him, Lord, I am ready to go with thee, both in prison and to death. And he said, I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before that thou shalt thrice deny that thou knowest me. So, this is Jesus talking to Peter, he's saying, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. So there's his warning. Jesus is warning Simon Peter. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. So Jesus is praying for Simon. He's warning Simon, saying, Satan hath desired thee. And he tells Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before you have denied me 3 times, that you denied me 3 times that you knew me. So now we're going to go over to verse 39. This is when Jesus prays in Gethsemane. And he came out and went, as he was wont, to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples also followed him. So we know that the inner 3 disciples was with Jesus in the garden. So that was Peter, James, and John. So, and when he was at the place, he said unto them, Pray that ye enter not into temptation. Jesus is specifically telling them to pray so they do not enter into temptation. And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he arose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said unto them, Why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. Now, it tells us that in Mark, it tells us that Jesus went to them 3 times, and each time they were asleep. So he has went to them 3 times. He has repeatedly warned them and told them to pray lest they enter into temptation. And he even specifically tells Peter that Satan has desired to have you, and you are going to deny me 3 times. And still, Simon Peter falls asleep when he should be praying. Okay, so let's go over to John chapter 18, verse 10. So this is after Jesus has done praying and they're coming to arrest him. And it says, Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Jesus unto Peter, Put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? So Simon has spent his time that he should have been praying. He spent his time asleep. And when he wakes up, they are coming to take Jesus, and Simon cuts off the man's ear. Okay, so he was sleeping, and he should have been praying. So when he wakes up, he is immediately into action. Guys, we have to pray before we act. We have to pray when we know that temptation is coming, especially if Jesus has given us a warning saying, pray lest ye enter into temptation. And in this instance, he specifically is telling Simon Peter, Satan desires to have you, and you are going to deny me 3 times, and you need to pray lest ye enter into temptation. So he goes to them, those 3 disciples, he goes to them 3 times and finds them sleeping. So the other 2 were sleeping, yes, and he's telling them that they needed to pray as well. But looking at Simon Peter specifically, he tells him and warns him over and over, if we know that Satan desires to have us, and he does desire to have everyone, he does not want us serving God, we have to be prayed up. You know, we need to be prayed up. We need to be praying instead of falling asleep. And there are times when we physically need sleep and we physically need to rest. But in those moments where you know temptation is coming and you know that you are about to have a battle and you know you need to pray before action, you have got to be disciplined enough to not fall asleep and to be diligent in your prayer life and to seek the Lord, because those temptations are going to come. And especially if we know ahead of time what our battle is. We may not always know our battle or our specific temptation, but especially when we know something's coming up that we may struggle with, especially if we need to act on something, we need to pray. You know, Simon woke up from his sleep and cut off the servant's ear, and we have to pray before our action. And so looking back on all these stories, we need to not be lulled into a false sense of security, you know, going in with the enemy and falling asleep. We need to make sure we're not sleeping with the enemy. We need to make sure that we're aware of those who do not value us, and be cautious of giving our secrets and our heart to the enemy. You know, like Samson, he was shown time and time again that Delilah did not love him, did not care for him, yet he fell asleep at her knees. Do not let the love blind you from who someone truly is, okay? And then whenever we know that we have a temptation or a battle coming, we need to pray. We've got to quit falling asleep. We have to quit falling asleep when we need to be seeking the Lord and praying. So I urge you to pray and seek the Lord and not spiritually fall asleep and be blinded by the world. So I love you, and Jesus loves you. God bless you.